Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of the Edlow Podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. I always say it 3 times. Not that it matters. If you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what your problem is. But this is one of my favorite things to do is to interview people who I consider friends and people who I've seen uh, learn and grow in their fields or in their groups. And this is no exception. I have my partner. You're my partner now, Nolan Jones. How does that feel? Has that kicked in yet?
Yeah, it's kicked in a little bit. It's little changes. Just like seeing putting partner in a letter rather than associate or something like that. When I'm doing a motion, it says in the very first line, Nolan Jones. I'm a partner at Dreyer Babich rather than an attorney. I think that's the little changes, and I kind of acknowledge it every once in a while, but starting to kick in a little bit.
Yeah. So this is your first. I mean, you just you became a partner mid-year last year, right? And so you've been about 6 months now. And you started out here at our law firm, Dreyer. For those of you who don't know, um, we're attorneys at the firm Dreyer, Babich, Buccola, Wood and Campora. Try to say that 3 times fast. And we both kind of came up the same way, through the ranks, starting here as a law clerk and clerking for a partner here at the firm, and then and just kind of working your way up through the ranks. And so I remember you coming in. I think you came in probably right as I became an attorney. I think you is that right? I was already an attorney when you came in.
Yeah, I think you had just become an attorney. I came in 2013. So when did you
Yeah.
become an attorney?
Yeah, so I passed the bar in December of 2012, so that was right in that same spot. And so you've been now here at the firm, when did you become an attorney now?
I passed the bar in May of 26, or well, February bar, but I got the results in May of 2016.
Okay, yeah, so you've been now about 10 years, uh, as an attorney, and, it's interesting because I really think it takes a good 5 years to feel like, you're not a complete idiot, and then, like, by 10 years, you're like, "Okay, I kinda get this," but you've actually kinda carved yourself out in a bit of a kind of, I wouldn't say a specialty role, but you take on a lot of complicated cases, a lot of slip and falls, products liability cases. You do, a lot of motion work. Tell me, how did that kinda come about?
Yeah. So when I first started, I'll kind of go back to the beginning. I My initial story is very similar to, if people know your history, that's kind of similar to mine. I hadn't worked in an office before, but this was the first time I ever worked in an office. Was at Dreyer Babich. I wanted to get a job before I became an attorney, working in an office of some kind or in a law firm. I wasn't sure what to do yet. Bob Bale is one of our other partners here at the firm, and he does a lot of really complicated, complex litigation. He came into my civil procedure class, my first year of law school, gave a presentation, said, if you come and work for us, then you'll have the experience of a second or third year lawyer by the time you graduate law school and pass the bar. And that sounded pretty good to me. I needed the experience. And um, I ended up getting hired by him. There were a few people that applied and got hired with different attorneys at the firm, but I specifically got hired by him. And he trained me on a lot of complex cases, more so than just car accident cases, but a lot of cases against public entities or against corporations, or product cases and things like that. And it really got my feet wet in some very unusual circumstances. And
Okay.
I can talk about some of the specific cases, but I've kind of carried that forward. One thing that he told me when I was still a clerk for him is that oftentimes he will take on cases on topics that he doesn't really fully understand, so that he can get a better understanding of those topics and become an expert on those topics throughout the pendency of the case. I kind of like that strategy. It makes yourself become more educated.
Yeah, and just to I think you said they were unique cases. That is a Bob Bale case list for sure. He is, incredibly creative in the things that he does and is so knowledgeable in so many complex areas. It's really that's a That is both a blessing and a curse for a for a law clerk. So tell me, did you notice when you were a law clerk that you were kind of having a different law clerk experience than some of the other clerks?
I definitely was. So when I first got hired on, I had my interview with Bob. We had discussed sports a little bit. I mentioned I was a football fan, and he had a case against USC. Uh, it was the Armstead v. USC case, which was in the news. But a lot of what I was doing in my first year when working on that case was really researching into this football player and like mock drafts on where he was supposed to go in the draft, but he couldn't because of the things that happened in this case to make him unable to play. So I was looking into draft stock and what what a rookie would get paid if they're a first round pick versus second, third, fourth, fifth, things like that, and then following his stats and what happened to the team after he left. And it was really more of like a sports analyst than it was a law clerk for a while there. I had mentioned to Bob that I went to law school with the hopes of being a sports agent because I was a big sports fan, and that ultimately I grew to really like the work we were doing here, so decided to stay on here rather than pursuing that. But that was just an example of a strange set of circumstances. Yes, I was still learning to do discovery responses, medical record summaries, things like that. But I was doing a lot of very unique football specific work to start with. And then there were other cases after that where it was just kind of very strange research projects rather than just traditional law clerk stuff.
Yeah, and that's it's the benefit of working here at Dreyer Babich. I'm grateful. I'm very similar to you. Like I never worked at a law firm before. I really took the job because it was the only one offering, same thing. I grew to love the work. But one of the things that's so great about working here that I felt even as a law clerk was I remember the first 3 months working, I go, even if they didn't hire me here, everything that I'm learning is so like, it transcends just personal injury, it's just litigation in general, like, the way that you think, the way that you approach a case, the strategy, and Bob Bale it has always been, even still to this day, still practicing, just such a creative mind to be able to find and figure out and really hone these cases, and, I mean, that's a huge benefit to you to be able to work with that nonstop. I had an opportunity just for a little bit, like, every once in a while, I'd have a case with Bob when I was a law clerk, just because Bob and Roger were working together, Roger Dreyer and Bob Bale, and and I was always just so impressed with how thorough and how, detail oriented he was on and just almost felt like he knew where to look for things where other people maybe even didn't even know that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And as I continued working for him, there were a lot of cases that he has with their overlaps with Roger Dreyer, and I would get to see the differences between the two. And I think that was very helpful for me when I was starting out, also to pick things from each that I liked and discard things that maybe I didn't fit with my personality as much. But like watching the two of them, watching Roger take a deposition versus watching Bob take a deposition, they're both incredibly effective at getting information, but they go about it in completely different ways. A deposition that Roger might get through an hour or two of just leading question after leading question, knowing exactly what he wants, versus Bob going in extreme detail for 8 hours and 250-page deposition transcript. It's it's very interesting to see the differences. I've tried to take aspects of both of them, like, use it myself. So
And
it was a great experience, though.
that's what makes I think personally, I think that's what makes a good lawyer. I remember walking in, my first trial with Roger was I think it was my first year. Um, he just pulled me into this, like, public entity wrongful death case with him, and, I had kinda worked with it on it a little bit as a clerk and did some discovery responses, and he's like, "This is your case now." And so I did all the discovery, and I did all the depositions, and I did all the stuff. I mean, first year, right, like, not really knowing anything about public entity work, having to figure that all out. But then I remember going to the trial with Roger, and he gave me you know how it is if you go to trial with one of these guys, your first trial, they wanna make sure you don't screw anything up. So you're taking some pretty you're taking witnesses, but they're witnesses that if you screw it up, it's not gonna destroy the case, right? And then a lot of what you're doing is just providing support and, doing those things. That's what a good second chair does. And I remember, uh, looking at Roger and then looking at the defense attorney, and when you've only seen Roger and Bob and these guys go, uh, it's very daunting to be like, "How are you how am I ever gonna be, this good?" And then you see the defense attorney, and then you're like, "What?" I remember asking Roger, I'm like, "What would you rate the defense attorney?" And he said, "Probably like a B." And I go, "You're kidding. That's a B? Oh, well, I could do this." You know what I mean? And so but what I learned was I was like, I tried my first witness to be like Roger, and it went okay, but it wasn't me, and so then when I started taking, like, things that I liked that he did or that Bob Bale did or maybe even like a Stacey Roberts or a John Hayes, these people who kinda mentored me, uh, and kinda made it my own, I became incredibly more, effective, if that makes sense. Did you notice something similar?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You can't try and be someone else. You've got to be yourself, but you can definitely take aspects of it that fit to you.
Mhm.
So I found it to be the same way. My first trial was with Bob Bale. So after I became an attorney, we had a trial down in Santa Maria,
Mhm.
very small town, and we didn't have any lit support come down with us. So I was the litigation support staff, and for those who don't know what that means, it means I had to do all of the technical stuff. That is not why I got hired here. I'm not a tech. I understand it to some extent. So I had to learn how to do trial director and put the exhibits up and all that kind of stuff, while also being an attorney on the case and taking my own witnesses and things. So that was a challenging one. But yeah, you're right. The first trial you take, you're not going to have a lot of witnesses of consequence. I had some family members and a couple of witnesses who weren't key witnesses, but it was still, just going through your first trial is a big deal for sure.
Yeah, and, one of the things I love about the way we were trained and the way that they train you up here is, I love how Roger would do things purposely to just make me uncomfortable, make me th and I don't mean, like, make me uncomfortable, but I mean, like, put me in uncomfortable positions that he knew would help me grow.
Right.
So, there would be times where, night before, we're going back to the hotel room to prep for the next day, and then he'd be like, "You know what? I think you're gonna take that witness." And I had had my other witnesses set for like a week, right? I had already my outlines and I'd met him and I'd talked to him. And then I have, 3 hours at the end of the night to prep for the next witness. And of course, again, it was a witness that looking back, oh, look at that. My lights went off. How about that? Hey, okay. And so always another thing on the Edlow podcast. No, but doing all of that and it just helped me learn and grow in a better way. I just think that the way we were trained, so just A plus work, you know?
Yeah. The first month I was an attorney, I had several depositions I had to take. I'd never taken a deposition before, but they were all depositions on this massive case, very complicated case, the Georgie case, which is a peanut allergy case. I took 7 depositions in that case of camp counselors. So there were a bunch of like 15-year-old kids who were camp counselors at this camp where someone had an anaphylactic shock reaction to peanut butter. But it wasn't just a rear end collision where you'd usually start off taking depositions, which would have been nice, I think. But instead, I was taking these completely abstract depositions for which there's no real outline for me to base it off of. I kind of had to make up my own kind of outline because there a lot of times we don't want to reinvent the wheel in what we're doing. If there's work that other people have done that can be helpful to you, you want to use that. But that was a situation right at the start where I was kind of throwing my feet into the fire and something that I didn't really even understand what I was doing. But you learn as you go. About halfway through the first one, I'm like, okay, this is how these are going to go. And then I got the information I needed there on. Now, again, not super important witnesses, but still important to me at the time.
Right, right, and every witness is important, but some of them, if you don't do a good job, they can kill the case, right?
Right.
And they definitely never put us in a position to really hurt a client, and I think
Of course.
that was good and used it as a training uh, a great training tool. You said you wanted to be a sports agent, and then you gravitated to personal injury when you started working here. I know what it was for me, but for you, what was it that drew you to say, "Yes, this is the area that I wanna be in?"
Well, I think this may be similar for you, but a lot of it's competition. The reason I like sports is competition. I know, you were in wrestling back in the day, and I had my
Mhm.
own sports and games that I was involved in, like beer pong in a past life. But the thing that excited me about being a sports agent is, being around athletes and the competitive nature and hoping that they do well and things like that. But here in what we do, it's a similar competitive nature. It's you against the other side. You want to make sure you're getting the best results for your client that you possibly can, um, and kind of punish the insurance company at the same time. So the competitive nature is what I really like about it, and it's striving to do better and better for yourself and for your clients. I found that really exciting, and just seeing the reaction on people's face when you get a good result. And I would sit through those meetings with Roger or Bob when I was still a clerk and see them meeting with the clients and how grateful they would be for the work that we do. Made me really want to do that and work
Yeah.
with clients.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved about this was I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to put bad guys in jail, and I did an externship at a DA's office, and, I remember not really feeling like I was doing a lot of helping, I did a lot of domestic violence and, you get just a bunch of victims who are clearly victims who are recanting and don't really wanna assist you, and, you don't really have a client per se, your client is the people, so, there's not really anyone who pats you on the back at the end of the case, and then on top of that also, there was just so many things about it that I just felt like, "Man, I don't know if I want to be desensitized like that, kind of, be dealing with that every single day." And when I got here and I started working here, I remember thinking, we really are helping people, you know, um, people who can't help themselves navigating a system that is complex, that they really can't handle themselves. And, I remember one experience I had was, I was working as a clerk on a case where a lady, was in a crosswalk and had gotten ran over by a bus and had her leg amputated as a result. Really gnarly injury. And, I talked to this woman, I think, probably weekly or every other week for about a year while I was clerking for her, and just getting information and doing things. And when the case resolved right before trial, she came in for disbursement and Roger, uh, had her she specifically asked to meet me and made a point to have me meet her and give her a hug, and I just remember thinking, I was like, "This is what I wanna do. I wanna help people. I wanna help people and have this feeling every single day," and we don't have it every day. Right? I mean, it's grueling work, but man, that's a great payoff, you know? What we do, it's interesting, what we do is so I don't think people understand, like, a lot of our clients, I mean, you've had these cases where they're gonna be dealing with injuries the rest of their lives. Some of them can't work, they can't support their families, and they're literally gonna leave. They're leaving their livelihood in our hands and they're relying completely on us to help them feed themselves and their families, and that is a big responsibility that I know you take very seriously, as do I, and so, how do you cope with that? That kind of, I guess you say the pressure and the kinda daunting task that we have in these cases.
Well, w- what one thing that you mentioned a moment ago is something that I have two kids. I have two daughters, And a few years ago, when they started getting old enough to understand, I'm going to work every day, and what am I doing? They asked me what I do for a living. I mentioned that I was a lawyer, and they said, "What's a lawyer? What does a lawyer do?" And I just said to them what you just said to me. I help people, and our entire purpose is to not we're not pursuing our own interests. We're pursuing the interests of someone else who's been wronged by someone. And I think you asked, how do we cope with that responsibility? I mean, it's just what we have to do. It's our job. It is, there are larger cases and there's smaller cases, but to that individual, to that one person, the that case is everything for them. It's the biggest case in the world to them. So you have to treat them all with respect, and you have to do the very best you can, because you're the only person who's able to stick up for this person against the insurance company that's on the other side. So you just have to do it, and I guess that's how you cope with it. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting what you just said, um, we I don't know how big your caseload is, I'm sure it's similar to mine where at times you'll have 100 cases at a time, right? And for each one of these clients, no matter how big or small the case is, it's everything they think about. And, that's why, it's sometimes at the end of a case when, there's a settlement offer on the table, or you're at a settlement conference or a mediation or something, and defense is offering them money. I often have them ask me, you know, I often have them ask me, what I would do in a case, and I always tell them, I'm like, Don't ask me, it's not my case," right? Because, we're gonna have these cases, 5 years from now, as much as I love every one of my clients, I really do, like, I think they're all great, and when I see them on the street, I say hello. Um, 5 years from now, I'm not gonna be thinking about that case. I'm gonna be thinking about the 100 other cases that I'm dealing with. So they really, when you're a plaintiff in an injury case, you really have to, you really have to make the decision that's best for you, whether that's try the case if you wanna take that risk or if you don't. I've always been able to, it took me a long time, but now I'm able to kinda just accept whatever decision they make. Have you noticed something similar in your practice?
So earlier we were talking about how we borrow things from others, how we borrow from Bob and from Roger. There's a Peloton instructor that I borrowed a phrase from. The bicycles. A guy named Dennis Morton, and he says at the beginning of every one of his classes, "I make recommendations, you make decisions." So
Yeah.
he'll tell you how you're supposed to be doing the bike, but it's ultimately up to you to do it. Our job is to put the case in the best possible situation for the client, and we can recommend to them, you know, we can make representations about what we believe may happen or may not happen, but ultimately it's not our case, it's theirs, and it's up to them whether they want to take an offer or they want to take a case to trial. We just have to put it in the best position that we can for them, and it's ultimately their call. But our job is to put them in that situation where they can make that decision. Um, so yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, now, there might be, like a law student or somebody like that is, listening to this, and they're hearing that you have, kids, and, I don't remember, you did not have kids. Did you have kids when you were in law school?
I had one.
Okay, yeah. So if they're a law student, they're going, "Man, like, they've got kids, and they're working long hours, and they're doing these things. I don't know if I can do that." How have you been able to cope with the hours that the job demands, but also be present for your kids and your family?
So when I was in law school, that was the hardest time crunch, I feel like, because you did the same thing I did. We both went to night school at McGeorge, right?
Right.
Yeah. So when you go to night school, you're at school from 6 to 9. You're going to work from 8 to 5. Um, and then sometimes when your attorney you're working for is in trial, then you've got to work, some weekends or work later nights and things like that. And that's a big time crunch, especially when you've got a newborn. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to manage. I was lucky enough that my wife was wonderful throughout the entire time I was going through law school, and she helped out a lot, and she's still wonderful, and she helps, she takes care of the kids a lot when I can't get the stuff. But there's also times when you just have to put your family first. I mean, you should always put your family first, but there's certain things that you just make sure you're at. You and I were talking earlier today, and we both have our kids' first basketball game today. So my
Yeah.
daughter's got a game at 5:30. It's her first game with the school, and I'll make sure I'm there, even though I've got stuff I've got to do at work, and I can do that after they go to sleep, and I can come in early tomorrow and things like that. But there's experiences that you just have to get to. But also with the job, as you do it more and more, the things that used to take you, you know, a week to do, you can now do within probably a couple hours. And so you
Yeah.
get better and better at doing things, and you create your own kind of stockpile of information that you can pull from, and you just continue to build on that. So the job gets easier to do, even though it's not an easier job, and easier to fulfill within the time commitment that you've got, and it makes you available to do more things in your personal life as well. I think it's very tough at the beginning. It gets easier. If I'm talking to a law student right now, then yes, it'll be a big challenge for you at first. But as you, just with anything, as you develop a level of mastery, it becomes easier to do, and the rest of your life becomes easier as well.
Yeah, and one thing I've always told people is they're like, "Well, how do you do, like, a work-life balance?" And I'm just like, "There is no such thing." Like, it's just not a real thing. Like, when you've got kids and you're working and you're doing all these things, you're just like one of those guys with the plates that are on the sticks, right? And, like, you're getting them all going, and every once in a while, something needs to spin, and I think that the thing I would recommend people do is just you have to be incredibly effective with time management and just take it's really it's really about just making sure that the time that you're using is effective, and that's one of the things that you're talking about, right? Is as we become attorneys and we get more experience and we've been here 60, 70 hours a week for the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years or longer, you learn efficiency. You learn how to do things. You learn how to better manage your time, and then over the course of that time, you get better, right? And
Right.
so, and now, like, you work around things. You work around you got a basketball game at 5:30, I have one at 3:45, right? So guess what I'm gonna be doing at about 5:30, right? I'm gonna be on my laptop in my office, working and answering the emails that I missed and, working later tonight. And that's just the way you do it, right? And so, now, also one of the things that I find always interesting in talking with other attorneys is I like talking about things that you think are important in your field. And we're both personal injury attorneys. So if someone walks up to you and says, "Hey, what are some of the things that you think are the most important things for someone to know?" Or if you got a friend call you and said, "Hey, I just got in a car accident. What do you think I need to know?" What are some tips of the trade that you think are really important?
Sure. For someone who gets in a car accident, I was in a car accident about 2 weeks ago. I got sideswiped by someone who then hit and ran.
Uh,
Um, hey,
you okay? Do you need me to do an intake or?
I'll be okay, I think. Uh, but the the thing to do right away, I mean, you wanna make sure that you are doing a few essential things to document stuff at first. For one, I know that when we get in a lot of cases, there's not very good photographs of what happened, of
Mm,
the area, or of, where the cars were, or the damage to the vehicles or whatever. Or they'll take photos of the damage to a vehicle, but it's from really close up, so you can't really tell what you're looking at. So I think it's important to take a lot of photographs. I
mm,
think it's important to, uh, you know, call the police and let them know what happened, because even if someone at the scene says to you, "I'm sorry, it was my fault," just because they tell you that there doesn't mean that's what they're going to tell to their insurance company. And if there's no report, then it's going to be a fight a ways down the road. Um, And then probably the biggest thing is just make sure you get help early on. Get an attorney early on, or at least talk to one. Not every case means you need to have an attorney. Not every car accident requires an attorney. But I have people all the time who I talk to, and we'll meet for an hour or so. And sometimes I'll sign them up. Sometimes I'll tell them how they can resolve the case on their own if they do certain things. But I think it's helpful just to talk to someone if you don't necessarily know what you should be doing. Um, because the insurance company is going to want to talk to you right away. They're going to want to get a statement from you within the first week. They're going to want to settle your case with you as soon as they possibly can, even if you're still hurt and you're still treating and you have no idea the extent that your injuries are going to be. And they're going to want to resolve it quickly because once you've resolved a case, you can't go back and ask for more later. So I think it's important that you get someone in your corner because the insurance company, they have people in their corner that are advising them. They have the experience in doing these types of things. So I think you need if you're a victim in one of these situations, you need to talk to someone just so that you have someone that's in your corner.
So I think that's 100% true. I often tell my clients when they come in, um, because I hear the same thing over and over and over, and it kinda drives me nuts when we're, talking about possibly pursuing litigation. Everybody says, "Well, I wanted to come in earlier, but, I just don't wanna be that guy. I don't wanna be that person. I'm not somebody who just sues anybody." And that is just insurance company propaganda rearing its ugly head against our clients because they're saying that because the insurance company has spent a lot of money and a lot of time convincing people that if you hire an attorney for a personal injury case, it's because you're trying to get a bunch of money. And that is just not the case 99.9% of the time. Like, I tell all of my clients, I go, listen, let's imagine that you're walking into a park and you've never played chess before. And you walk up to a guy who's got a chessboard there and you sit down to play chess, and he has played chess 10 times a day, 5 days a week for the last 5 years. Who do you think is going to win that game? And almost certainly you're going to lose, not because you're not smart or that you couldn't figure it out, but because you just don't even know the rules. So these insurance companies, when you try to handle it yourself, understand that that adjuster is like that chess player. He's doing this 10 times a day, 5 days a week, and he's done it for 5 to 10 years, and he knows all the rules and you don't. So when he's asking for your social security number, you're not entitled he's not entitled to that. When he's asking for a recorded statement, they're not entitled to that. When they do this thing and say, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna do you a favor. We're gonna give you this medical release that you sign, and we'll order all the records for you so you don't have to pay for them or we'll deal with it." And you go, "Oh, how nice." And you just sign this blank release, and then they get all the records that you've ever had from birth to present. And they're only entitled to things that are related to the areas of the body that you're claiming. You have a right to medical privacy in California. So you give that away, then they can, if you're a female and you had issues during pregnancy, they're not entitled to that information, but they get it. You ever had an unfortunate disease or something that you don't want people to know about? There's that. If you've had mental health records of something that happened, a traumatic event in your life, if you check the box that says they can get your mental health records, they can get that, and they're not entitled to it necessarily. And so they do all these things under the guise of you wanting to help them out and look like you're not trying to do anything and you're only hurting your case. And so I think the number one thing I that's so important is a consultation with a personal injury attorney is almost always free. So you can talk to them on the phone. I often will spend a half hour to an hour with everybody who calls me or comes in, and I'll give them all the ideas and stuff, and if you decide you don't wanna sign up, no harm, no foul. I don't charge you for the hour. It's just an opportunity for you to talk to me and then, if not, then when you do hire an attorney, you don't most personal injury attorneys, if not all, are on a contingency fee where you're not paying them up front. You get a cut of whatever the of whatever the recovery is. There's really no, downside to just at least talking to an attorney, you know? Um, so I gotta ask you, when it comes to my clients, I think there's a couple of things that I think that everyone needs to know, and the number one thing is you gotta treat. You gotta get the treatment. I mean, wouldn't you say that's probably number one?
Yeah, and that's what happens when we have clients who haven't talked to anyone for 6 months. It's not that I'm gonna tell you where to go to see a doctor or anything like that, but I'm gonna remind you that the insurance company is gonna point out if you have any gaps in treatment. I tell every person who comes through my door, there's 3 things we have to prove. The first is liability, second's causation, and the third is damages, and causation ends up being a challenge a lot of times because we have to prove that the injuries that we're claiming were caused by this incident and the treatment that we're claiming were caused by this specific incident. And when you go to the doctor and then the doctor gives you a prescription for ibuprofen and says, come back in 3 months if you're still having problems, and then you don't treat for those 3 months, and then you think, yeah, should I go back? I don't know. I'm still sore. And then there's nothing that's been done. The insurance company is going to look at it as though, okay, this is a person who was in a car accident that had one medical appointment, so their case is worth, 500 bucks, 1,000 bucks, something like that. When really you've had ongoing issues, but you haven't done anything about it. And so I think that's a massive problem that people who just aren't informed about what they should be doing, they don't know what they're supposed to do. Uh, they kind of miss the boat in that situation.
Yeah, and it's funny because well, it's not funny, but I mean, it's interesting because I just don't think that people understand, and I'll tell you my view on this. Most of the time, what happens is, the issue becomes an issue of insurance, and what do I mean by that? Health insurance, because health insurance is designed in a certain way that they only wanna give you the most conservative care first. So, they're not gonna let you just go get an MRI and go to a specialist. They want you to try things like physical therapy or chiropractic or acupuncture or one of these things, and so you have this primary care doctor that's essentially your gatekeeper, and they look at it and they go, "Yeah, we think you have an injury. Why don't you try this physical therapy first before we send you off to anybody?" Well, the problem becomes they get into physical therapy or chiropractic and they learn some good things and they feel good while they're going. And then when they feel good while they're going, they realize that these are stretches that they could probably do at home, right? And so they go, "Okay, well, yeah, I think I'm gonna just do these at home because it does take a lot of time. I take an hour off of an hour and a half to 2 hours off of work. I gotta drive there. I gotta do the thing. I gotta drive back. I'd rather just not do that, and I just do it at home and see how it goes." Well, there's no record that you're actually doing it at home. So you're doing it at home and all these things, and honestly, you're probably not doing it as well without somebody who's trained to show you how to do it when you're doing it yourself. Or maybe what happens is, and this is what I see the most, is let's say your pain at the beginning is a 7 out of 10, you go to physical therapy, and then as you go to physical therapy for a little while, your pain gets down to a 2 out of 10. Your pain was a 0 out of 10 before, but now it's a 2 out of 10. And so you go, "You know what? This is taking a lot of time. I got a lot of irons in the fire. I can live with a 2 out of 10. I'm gonna let this go with a 2 out of 10, and yeah, I'll stretch out when I need to or whatever." And so you start living with a 2 out of 10. But then after a while, that 2 out of 10 comes back to a 3 out of 10 and a 4 out of 10, and there's nobody documenting your 2 out of 10. And so then all of a sudden, 3, 6, even more, 9 months go by, and now you're back to a 4 or 5 out of 10, and you go back and you're like, "Hey, this is hurting me and this is doing this thing." Well, now there's a big gap, right? There's a big gap in treatment. What do the defense attorneys wanna do? They wanna drive a truck right through it, and they wanna say, "Oh, well, yeah, sure, sure, this guy sure, we'll admit that this pain for a month, that was all related to the collision, but look, he stopped going. Why did he stop going? Because he was better. He obviously was better, right? Now all of a sudden something else must have happened. Something else must have happened that causes this 5 out of 10 pain. That's not our fault." And then they hire a doctor. And I often tell my clients, I'm like, they're gonna hire a doctor that they can pay. Your leg could have gotten cut off in this collision, and the doctor's gonna say it would have fallen off anyway, right? You had some condition that your leg was gonna come off no matter what. So, uh, you know, I tell all my clients, I go, "I don't care if your pain is a point 0.5 out of 10. If it was 0 out of 10, you go to the doctor until you're back." The whole purpose of this claim is to put you back in the position you were before. And if you haven't gotten back there, you keep treating until you are back there, or someone can tell you what it would take to get back there. And, uh, and so the other thing that I think is really difficult, for clients is patience. And what I mean by that is they get to that too. I have this conversation a lot. They call me up and they go, "Hey, Josh, I'm ready to wrap this case up." And it's been like 3 months, right? And I've been talking to them every month, so I know that they're still in pain. And so I'll go, "Okay, well, let me ask you a couple questions. If you were to rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10 right now, what would it be?" They're like, "Oh, it's like 2." "Okay, cool, cool. So before this collision, what was your pain?" 0 out of 10. "Okay. So question, do you wanna live with your pain being a 2 out of 10 forever?" And they go, I go, "Well, no, but I just assume it'll get better." I go, "Okay, well, why don't we wait a little bit and see if it does?" Because I had an experience I'll share as a law clerk when we used to take all the intakes, right? The law
Right.
clerks would take the intakes. We were the first line of defense on cases that were coming through. And I remember, I think it was my 2nd year as a law clerk, a lady called me, and she had been in a collision on 65 in Lincoln. She was a homeless lady, and she was hitchhiking. She got picked up by a drunk driver, and that drunk driver drove that car right into the concrete wall of an overpass. And, I don't know how they got a hold of her, but somehow the insurance company got a hold of her, and she was saying she had some neck pain, and they offered her $750, and this was back in 2010, maybe? So, like, $750 to a homeless lady in 2010 sounded like a lot of money. And, and, um, so she took it. And then about 3 months later, she started feeling residual symptoms in her arm. She goes to an urgent care. They rush her to a hospital, and she has an emergency surgery. And she's calling and saying, "Hey, is there anything I can do to make the insurance company pay for this surgery? Because I had no health insurance, and now I've got a bill that's, $100,000." And I was like, "Nothing I can do. Signed a release. Case is over." So, yeah, I mean, there's charity exceptions you can apply for, you know? And, uh, and so I am never worried about settling a case, like, too long. It's always, I don't wanna settle it too quick. Does that
Right.
make sense to you?
Yeah, the most common question, well, there's 2 questions I get with every case I sign up, and you probably get the same 2 questions. And one of them is, "How much is my case worth?" And the other one's, "How long is this gonna take?"
Yeah.
And, we don't know how much the case is worth until you finish treating, and, we don't our firm, at least, we take every case on as if it's gonna go to trial. We work it up as if it's gonna go to trial. We want to make sure we can get the maximum value that you deserve for your injuries. We don't wanna resolve it early on just because we wanna get it done. Because then we're not doing you the service that you signed up for. We want you to be back to how you were prior to the incident, or we wanna know from a doctor that unfortunately you're not gonna get back to how you were before the incident, and then we can factor that in. But, resolving a case within 3 months, unless there's insurance issues, there's just not enough insurance coverage. I very rarely resolve any kind of case that early on. I usually tell people the average is 6 months to 2 years, um, but oftentimes it's longer than that.
Yeah.
The only time it's shorter than that is if there's just not enough insurance coverage, unfortunately, and then we have to have a whole other conversation about, make sure you get a better insurance policy.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I would, if I was anything, I would recommend to just the general population of California. It's that, I'm similar to you. I was in 2 car accidents. I was injured in both of them. And, I had enough insurance both times to cover um, to cover the injury. The first time I was hit, it was right after, I mean, I'd probably not even been an attorney for a year, um, and I still had my insurance for when I wasn't a law clerk, and it was a $100,000 policy. And like I said, that was enough money to cover cover the injuries that I had in the case. But I remember thinking to myself, I have 4 kids, and I was like, "Okay, so if I got hit and I was, like, out forever, $100,000 isn't gonna do it, right?" So I upped my insurance to a 250 policy with $1,000,000 umbrella. I was shocked at how little it cost to go that high, because it's very rare you're gonna need it. But then I got in a second car accident, it was a little more severe, Again, that was more than enough money. That was enough money to cover the injury. But I remember thinking, I was like, "Man, even that, even $1.25 million at my age," at the time, I think I was 36 or 37 years old. It's like, that's not enough to cover me for the rest of my life. Um, so, a lot of people don't even know what their coverages are.
They
Uh,
have full coverage, right?
yeah, full coverage, but they don't know what that means. And
Right.
I've had people come in and say they had full coverage and it was the California minimum. At the time, I remember some of them were $15,000 a person. Now it's up to, I think it's 30 now, but and then there's some that they had 250 and you just don't know. So I would highly recommend that everybody who's listening to this should call and talk about underinsured motorist coverage if they have it and how much they have, because so many people are grossly underinsured in California.
Yeah, and, those minimum policies, even though they're the least they're the least expensive, they're the biggest money makers for the insurance company. It's counterintuitive. Uh, you Most people, or a lot of people anyway, they will choose these policies because they're the least expensive ones, but the reason they're so they're inexpensive, but to up it to the next tier or whatever of insurance is not a whole lot more than what you're already paying, and then you're capped. So if you die or if you're paralyzed or broken bones, you're limited to how much insurance is available from the other person or from your own policy if you have an uninsured motorist policy. So it's you're helping the insurance company out by doing the lowest possible policy they have. It's better to make sure you have plenty of insurance. I'm no insurance salesman. I don't like insurance companies at all, but it's you're just doing them a favor by getting the very minimum. I would say.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I often have to remind my clients because they'll say when we're doing a case in an underinsured motorist, context where we're dealing with their own insurance company, like, "Well, they're my insurance company," and I go, "Yeah, they don't care."
Right.
They're gonna treat you just like you if you were the other guy, right? They do not care. They are not interested in fairness, they're only interested in profit, and so, the more money they're giving you, the less profit they have for their shareholders. So, you definitely, yeah, that's why we have jobs. If the insurance companies were fair, we would all be out of business, right?
Absolutely.
And so, now, so you've reached, I guess, I don't know what you call it, the pinnacle. You're a partner now at Dreyer Babich, which is a big thing. I mean, you should be proud of yourself. I know we all are for you being able to join the ranks. What is the next step? What is the next goal for Nolan Jones?
Well, um, it's a good question. I mean, continue to do what I'm doing. I think I want to try some cases without other attorneys. Try them by myself, or be the first chair and have someone be my second chair would be a lot of fun. I think. Um, just continuing to improve my craft. I've done more speaking opportunities, um, like at at the CAOC event. CAOC is the California, or wait, Consumer Attorneys of California. So at conferences like that, where you're able to give insight to other attorneys, I think that's valuable. Just because you're able, if you learned a lot, which you and I both have doing this job, being able to share it with other attorneys so they can help their clients, I think is very helpful. Um, I want to have an attorney working for me at some point, or my associate, so I can kind of train them in the Nolan Jones way, rather just like Bob and Roger did for me and you, to be able to get them to kind of advance as well, and then yeah, just to continue doing what we've been doing. I think that's what I want to continue to do.
Yeah, I think, passing on it's odd for me to think the time flies so fast, especially for how hard we work. It's crazy to think when you look at the letterhead that we are in the spots that our mentors were in when we were working as law clerks, right? Like, we're the guys now
Mhm.
as far as the other ones coming up, that people look to for answers, and, I take that pretty seriously. I am like you in that I know that my training here, I'm sure you would agree that working for a Roger Dreyer or a Bob Bale or a Bob Buccola is, uh, is a is a very tough task. They expect a lot, but I am I owe everything I am as an attorney to Roger Dreyer taking a shot on me when literally no one else was. And, so I kinda wanna pay that forward, and we have the opportunity to do that by, building associates and teaching and training them and helping them figure out how they can be their attorneys. So,
Yeah,
um
and I think another thing as far I mean, giving information to other attorneys that is helpful to them is great. I think you and we've talked about this, about, you using, your platform or, expanding on this to give information to the public as well, not non-attorneys,
Right.
just on what our practice is about, going into more intricate details of specific types of claims or different parts of claims. We touched on it a bit on like a basic car accident, collision case, but we could definitely dive into products cases and slip and falls and all of that stuff if people are interested in hearing about it. I'm happy to kind of share our experiences with people just so they understand what to do in those circumstances, or they can just, if they're for entertainment purposes, even if they just want to know what goes on in those types of cases. I think that's another next step that I'd be interested in.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that you and I have been talking about, and I think we're gonna implement here on the podcast is, I don't know exactly what interval, but every month or so, kinda having you come back and we'll do kinda just some thoughts about law and things about our practice and things about the tips, if you would, for the general public, or even advice for law students who are thinking about this type of work. I think that would be a benefit for everybody to hear these things because it's such an what we do is such a niche thing, and it's really hard to do it well. There's a lot of guys out there and a lot of ladies out there, female attorneys, who do it, but very few do it well. And one of the things that I love about working where we work is everything that comes through. We have how many attorneys do we have even now? It's like 27,
25, 26.
20, 25 or 26. Yeah. So, I mean, we are all busy based on word of mouth referrals, um, that our firm will never be found on a billboard or in a commercial or on a bus, or on a bench. It's strictly people coming through who've had good experiences. And, uh, so we are I think it would be good for us to share our knowledge.
Yeah, I agree with you on that,
Yeah.
100%. I'd be interested in what people want to hear about. Like what are some things that people actually care to know more about, and I'm happy to talk for an hour about any specific topic. We'll just kind of go back and forth on different ideas and spitball them. But I agree with you. It's uh, we have an advantage working here that it's a very well established firm, and it's a lot of people who do what we do. There's a business aspect to it, and they may not be able to take on certain cases that they would otherwise like to take on because it can be difficult to prosecute specific types of cases, whether that be because of expense or other factors. Whereas we generally get a free rein to take on cases for the most part. We have to manage our time because we can't take on every case, obviously, but we're able to take on kind of unique things here, which has given us a unique perspective on different, you know, elements of different cases. So I think it's helpful to share that information. Hello?
I agree, and I'm looking forward to that. This is something that I think is gonna be a lot of fun, is, and also one of the things I love is I think our personalities are such that, we one of the things I always knew I wanted to do is whatever I did, I wanted to make it fun, and I think we both, we do that. If you're not having fun, it's not worth doing, and so I'm looking forward to having some fun with you and kinda doing a podcast, to try to just inform the general public and hopefully, I welcome anybody who's listening to this to post in the comments if there's something that you'd like us to address, happy to do that. If you wanna send, we're all over social media on Instagram, Facebook. I think I'm on TikTok. I'm technically on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter. I don't really, or X or whatever it is. I don't ever post on it. But you could always reach out and say, "Hey, I'd like you to address this topic." If you wanna do it anonymously so other people don't know that you're interested, that's fine too. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it with you, man. This will be fun.
It'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited about it. I appreciate you having me on. Anything else you want to know about me, about my background, or anything like that? Are we?
I do actually. One of the things I wanna know, tell me, you said you played football?
I played football in high school. Yeah,
What position were you playing?
I was a tight end and outside linebacker, but I didn't play a whole lot. I had a transfer situation. My so let me see. When was this? My sophomore year, I had a really bad injury. My kneecap, my patella was dislocated, went to the side of my leg. So I missed the whole season. And
Mm,
then, the following year, in the middle of the season, I switched schools. And then the year after that, there was a transfer issue. You used to not be able to transfer schools so easy as you can now. But I went to Jesuit, and they were blocking my transfer to Relinda to be able to play football on the Relinda team. So I didn't get to play till like the last 3 games of the season. We won the section championship, but I wasn't involved a whole lot in that championship. I did get a ring though.
nice. You got the ring. That's all that matters, right?
What
Yeah.
position did you play?
I didn't play football. I played
Oh,
basketball. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I was a center, obviously, but, yeah, I love the competition. I remember Roger, when he heard I played basketball, that it intrigued him because he said, "I know you're competitive, and you have to have that competitive spirit to do what we do," right? And there's no one more competitive than him, in every aspect of everything. And so, but okay, so now that let's shift to basketball. So what's going on with the Warriors? Are they gonna get any better or what?
well, they don't have anyone who can score besides Steph Curry. I mean, Jimmy Butler can, but he chooses not to for whatever reason. He's a pass first guy, but he needs to score the basketball. He's been doing a lot better lately, but I mean, no one else on the team is really putting up points. That's the challenge. And so I think there's going to be a trade coming up soon. I know Jonathan Kuminga's been sitting on the bench for about a month, and the rumors are he's going to be gone. I don't know. Tomorrow, I think, is he's got a contract that he re-signed in the off season, so he's not eligible to be traded, I think, until January 14th. So that's tomorrow. So maybe he'll be gone. He just doesn't fit with the offense, and maybe hopefully they get another piece that can help them. But I mean, it's tough to watch when Steph's not on the court.
Yeah, well, I'll
And
tell you what,
I shouldn't be complaining to you. I mean, as a Kings fan, I know it's been a tough year.
it has been so hard, but, we've been tied to Kuminga since the off season, and I'm curious to know what happens there, 'cause, I know that there was talk of a Malik Monk being part of the package, and interestingly, last night he put up 26, and he'd been a coach's decision DMP for a few games before. Well, he played a little bit for the Houston game on Sunday, but he had a really big breakout game, and it just, like, reminded us all why he was almost sixth man of the year, a couple years ago. And, so I'm interested to see, what the Kings do. I was really excited to see Trae Young get moved to Washington because it just felt like, okay, things are starting to move forward, right?
Right.
Uh, and so I'm really interested to see what happens next with the Kings and their rebuild. I hope it's not another situation like it usually is where they're tied to literally everybody, but then they get nobody, and that's just been the deal too long.
I've been hearing a lot about if there could be a Malik Monk for Kuminga trade, but usually it'll probably be a three-team trade, just
Mm,
because the Warriors, like the Kings, have too many guards.
yeah.
And so they need like the Warriors are the big rumor is Michael Porter Jr. They're trying to get Michael Porter Jr., who's been amazing this year, and it'll probably be too expensive for them to actually get. Um, but that's been one, or Trey Murphy is another big wing who can shoot the three because nobody on the Warriors besides Steph Curry could shoot a three pointer apparently. So, so that's what they're looking for, it sounds like. Malik Monk is a great scorer, and he would fit in well, but, like, Steve Kerr, for whatever reason, is hooked on, Brandon Pajemski and wants him to play all the time. And then there's, like, Moses Moody, who's another shooting guard who's been starting a lot lately. Jimmy Butler used to be a shooting guard, now he's in Steve Kerr's lineups playing, like, a power forward position, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so they're
Well,
just very
we've had that a lot,
yeah.
where just be for injuries. I mean, just people getting.
Like, you guys have had DeRozan playing, like, a 3 or a 4 a lot of
Yeah, he's been playing 3 the entire time he's been here, but he's even played some 4. Even Russell Westbrook has been guarding 4s, at times just because Keegan's out, Sabonis is out. We didn't have any size before those guys went out, and now it's even worse, where you got, Dylan Cardwell, as much as some people like him, he's a two-way player who cannot shoot to save his life. He's developmental, but having him, and I understand it's good for the development for him to be on the court, I don't disagree with that, but, you know, I don't know, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to watch, but hey, they've won 2 in a row now, so, I mean, we're pretty much coming out of the
they're on the
cellar, which
rebound. Yeah,
which is exactly what we don't want. We're like, "Oh, we had the worst record in the league, so we were right about to get that first pick, but now we're gonna get." I would hate to see this sounds so terrible, but I would hate for them to end up in, like, vying for that 10th spot again in the play-in, and then end up in a bad lottery spot and all that. I mean, it just that's like just a dungeon, to just be in, and we've been in that for a few years.
it's a
So,
treadmill. Yeah,
yeah.
I've heard of, about a month or 2 ago, I heard the commissioner talking about changing some of the rules for the lottery where there would be, like, a cutoff date. Did you hear about that?
No.
So, this is the newest idea, and I kinda liked it. To prevent tanking at the end of the year, there would be a cutoff at, like, game 60 or 65 or something like that, and they would take the bottom half of the standings at that point, and if none of those teams made the playoffs, then that's how the order would be for the purposes of the draft lottery, rather than waiting till the game 82, and then people are all trying to lose as much as possible the last 17 to 20 games.
I love that, and the reason I love that is because as a guy who goes to almost all the games, the last few games of the season are always so terrible
Yep.
because everybody's sitting. No, like, none of the including the playoff teams, right? And you may understand why. They're sitting him because they don't want him to get injured right before the playoffs. You wanna give him some rest, and all that, but, man, those last few games of the season where everybody's just trying to lose if they're not making the playoffs,
Mhm.
that's just terrible, man, and so.
Yeah, so I think if they do change the rules, then you've got situations where those teams wanna play spoiler at the end of the year, or they're playing for their contracts or whatever, and they're not, benching people so that they lose games so that they get a better draft pick. So I think it's a great idea. I hope they implement it in some way.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, for those who listened, I really appreciate it. Nolan, thanks for coming on. I can't wait to do another one of these with you. So,
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Just let me know when, and I'll be there.
all right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe.